Have you ever stopped to think about what happens to places when humans leave? Just imagine you're descending hundreds of meters in absolute darkness, where the only sound is the echo of your own footsteps reverberating off the icy stone walls. The air is heavy, damp, and you feel that cold that seems to penetrate to your bones. Suddenly you hear something, a noise that shouldn't be there. Footsteps, voices, or something your rational mind simply refuses to accept as real. In the frozen north of Canada, there are abandoned mines where miners swore they saw things that science can't explain. And today, you and I are going to explore 5 of these haunted mines together. I know what you're thinking. They're just stories, right? Urban legends created to scare tourists or add an air of mystery to places forgotten by time. But what if I told you there are official documents, worker accounts, security guard testimonies, and even environmental researchers confirming inexplicable experiences in these locations? Stick with me until the end of this video, because story number 3 will make you rethink everything you know about the supernatural. I'm serious. Northern Canada is a unique place in the world. Vast, icy territories where the darkness of winter can last for months, and the isolation is so intense that you can be hundreds of kilometers from the nearest civilization. It was in this hostile environment that, for decades, thousands of men and women descended into the depths of the earth in search of gold, uranium, asbestos, and other precious minerals. They worked in extreme conditions, facing not only the deadly cold of the surface, but also the hidden dangers underground: cave-ins, toxic gases, radiation, and fatal accidents that occurred with frightening frequency. But there's more. Something that isn't in official reports or history books. In hushed conversations between shifts in the personal diaries of deceased workers, in the legends passed down by the indigenous peoples who inhabited these lands long before the first excavations, there are stories that will send chills down your spine. Stories of ghosts wandering through dark tunnels, of equipment that turns on by itself decades after being deactivated, of voices calling names in the void, of mysterious lights dancing where there shouldn't be electricity. Have you ever experienced something like that? Have you ever felt that inexplicable sensation that you're not alone, even when all your senses tell you that you are? Today, we're going to visit 5 abandoned mines in northern Canada, each with its own terrifying legends. We, talk about places where the very earth is contaminated with deadly substances, where entire cities have been wiped off the map as if they never existed, where the uranium used in atomic bombs left a mark that some say is an eternal curse. What you're about to discover may surprise you, may frighten you, but above all, it will make you question what really happens in the places we abandon. And there's more. I am going to reveal which of these mines can still be visited today if you're brave enough. But before that, we need to understand the history behind each one. Because believe me, the real terror lies in the details no one tells you. So take a deep breath, because we're about to dive into the first location on our list, and I guarantee you. So take a deep breath, because we're about to dive into the first location on our list, and I guarantee you'll never look at an abandoned mine the same way again. But before we continue this journey together, I need to ask you something. Look, creating this kind of content is hard work. I spend days researching, verifying sources, looking for real accounts, talking to people who have lived these experiences, and you know what motivates me to continue. It's knowing that there are people on the other side of the screen who connect with these stories as much as I do. If this topic makes sense to you, if you're also fascinated by abandoned places and the mysteries they hold, leave a comment below about which abandoned place you've visited. And if you've ever felt that strange energy you can't explain, I read all the comments, and believe me, your stories are often as chilling as the ones I tell here. And if you're enjoying this video, if you're really engaged with this story, click that like button below. It might seem like a small gesture, but that's what shows YouTube that this content is worthwhile, that more people need to see it. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And if you're not yet subscribed, take this opportunity to subscribe and activate the bell, because every week I bring you a new story about abandoned places, urban legends, and mysteries from Canada and around the world. Believe me, you won't want to miss what's coming. All right. Now that we're officially a community of explorers of the unknown, let's get down to business. It's time to explore the first mine on our list, and I can guarantee you one thing. What happened in this place goes far beyond any rational explanation you could imagine. All right, now that we're officially a community of explorers of the unknown, let's get down to business. It's time to explore the first mine on our list, and I can guarantee you one thing. What happened in this place goes far beyond any rational explanation you can imagine. We're talking about a place where the very earth is poisoned, where tons of deadly substances remain frozen underground, and where the ghosts of the past seem to refuse to leave. Yellowknife, in Canada's Northwest Territories. A name that sounds almost poetic, but which hides one of the darkest stories in Canadian mining. It is here that we find the Giant Mine, an operation that ran for over 50 years, from 1948 to 2004, and which was responsible for extracting impressive quantities of gold from the Arctic subsoil. But all this wealth came at a price. A deadly price that continues to be paid to this day. Because hidden in the depths of this mine, frozen by the brutal temperature of the permafrost, are 237,000 tons of toxic arsenic. Can you imagine that? It's enough poison to contaminate entire generations, and it's there, sleeping in the ice, waiting. The hidden truth about the Giant Mine is that arsenic was an unavoidable byproduct of gold mining. For decades, operators didn't know what to do with this lethal substance, so they simply pumped it into underground chambers, creating massive deposits of toxic dust that today represent one of Canada's biggest environmental challenges. And it was in this contaminated environment, in this labyrinth of tunnels impregnated with one of the deadliest substances known to humankind, that the workers spent their days, breathing, sweating, living, and, in many cases, dying. The decisions made behind the scenes of this operation created not only an environmental disaster, but also a devastating human impact. Workers began to develop serious respiratory illnesses. Some died of arsenic poisoning over the years, their lives slowly consumed by the invisible poison that permeated every inch of that place. And this is where the story takes an even more disturbing turn, because according to accounts from miners who worked there, something was left behind when these people died. Something that still inhabits those dark tunnels. Spectral figures. That's the term that appears repeatedly in the testimonies. Workers who were alone on night shifts swore they saw human silhouettes moving in the underground chambers, especially in the areas closest to the arsenic deposits. Shadows that shouldn't be there. And there's more. Many report hearing coughs, That deep, painful cough that characterizes arsenic poisoning. Echoes of whispers in completely empty tunnels, as if the dead workers were still there, trying to warn the living about the danger they can no longer escape. But there is one specific event that transformed the giant mine from a dangerous place into something truly haunted. We're talking about September 1992. That year, a violent strike divided the Yellowknife community. Tensions between workers and management reached a breaking point, and in the early morning of September 18th, a devastating explosion rocked the mine tunnels. 9 miners who had crossed the picket line to work during the strike were killed instantly. The subsequent investigation revealed it wasn't an accident, it was murder. Someone had intentionally planted explosives, turning that tunnel into a tomb. Since that tragic night, security guards patrolling the abandoned giant mine area report experiences that defy any logical explanation. Mysterious lights moving through tunnels where no one should be. Flashlights turning on and off by themselves. The unmistakable sound of heavy boots walking in the dark, followed by absolute silence when they go to investigate. Some guards refuse to work alone there, saying that the feeling of being watched is so intense that it becomes unbearable. As if those 9 men who lost their lives so brutally never truly left the place. As if their journey was interrupted so abruptly that their souls remained trapped there, eternally repeating that last shift that never ended. And here's the part that really unsettles me. The giant mine isn't completely abandoned. Monitoring teams still go down regularly to check the freezing systems that keep the arsenic stable. Imagine being paid to go down into those tunnels, knowing not only the deadly poison around you, but also the stories that each worker before you told. Comment below. I wouldn't go down, if you also think that no amount of money would be worth that risk. But the truth is, some people do go down, and some of them come back with their own stories to tell. But if you think frozen arsenic and deadly explosions are disturbing enough, I need to tell you about a place where the transformation was so radical that an entire city simply ceased to exist. I'm not talking about a gradual decline or a slow abandonment. I'm talking about a deliberate, calculated erasure, as if someone had decided that that place and all the memories built there needed to be wiped off the face of the earth. Let's go to British Columbia, a mountainous and remote region in northwestern Canada, where for decades there was a town called Cassiar. It was a vibrant community with a school, a hospital, a supermarket, and homes where entire families grew up. At the center of it all was the Cassiar asbestos mine, a massive operation that extracted asbestos from the subsoil. For years, no one questioned the impact of that work. Asbestos was considered a miracle material used in construction, thermal insulation, and car brakes. The demand was enormous, and Cassiar prospered supplying this mineral to the whole world. But scientific revelations about the effects of asbestos on human health changed everything. Studies began to show that prolonged exposure to those microscopic fibers caused devastating respiratory diseases, especially lung cancer and mesothelioma. The corporate decisions that had previously sustained the town became unsustainable. In 1992, the mine closed. And this is where the story takes an absolutely surreal turn. The company that operated Cassiar didn't just abandon the town, they completely demolished it. House by house, building by building, everything was torn down and removed. In a matter of months, an entire community that had housed thousands of people over the decades was literally wiped off the map. Today, if you go there, you'll find only scattered ruins, concrete foundations covered in vegetation, and a heavy silence that seems to carry the weight of all those interrupted lives. Imagine the mindset required to make such a decision. To completely erase the physical existence of a place where people were born, married, raised children, and dreamed of the future. As if all that human history were too inconvenient to remain. And perhaps that's exactly why Cassiar has become one of the most haunted places in Canada. Because when you try to erase memory so violently, it seems like something resists. Something that refuses to be forgotten. Residents of the small communities surrounding where Cassiar used to live tell stories that are difficult to process rationally. They report seeing lights on in the windows of buildings that no longer exist. Think about that for a second. Windows that were demolished more than 30 years ago, shining in the darkness of the night as if someone were still home, waiting for the mind shift to begin. Truck drivers who have to pass through the area at night on the nearby road swear they hear shift sirens blaring in the absolute void. That characteristic sound that called the workers to start the day. But there are no sirens installed there anymore. There is nothing left but empty land and buried memories. The most disturbing legend of Cassiar, however, involves a specific figure who appears repeatedly in the accounts, a ghostly nurse. Witnesses say she appears near the site of the town's former hospital, always wearing an old white uniform, always with the same expression of despair on her face. And the detail that chills the blood of anyone who hears this story, she always points to her own chest. You don't need to be a doctor to understand the terrible symbolism of this gesture. Cassiar's hospital treated hundreds of workers who developed lung cancer from asbestos exposure. Many died there, their lives slowly consumed by a disease that began as just a cough, but progressively robbed them of their ability to breathe. Could this ghostly nurse be the spirit of someone who worked tirelessly trying to save lives already condemned by the very substance that sustained the city's economy? Or could she be one of the victims herself? A healthcare professional who spent so much time exposed to asbestos in the hospital that she also developed the disease. Her gesture, pointing to her chest, seems to carry an urgent message, a warning, a desperate attempt to communicate something the living need to understand. And here's the deeper truth about Cassiar. It's not just a ghost story. It's a story about identity, about belonging, about what happens when you erase not just a place, but all the physical proof that you and your community existed. Imagine working for decades in a place, building your life there, putting down deep roots, and then it all being erased as if it never existed. Would the forgotten souls of Cassiar be trying to prove that they existed, that their lives mattered? That their journey can't simply be demolished and forgotten? Right, Cassiar existed, if you believe that no company has the right to erase the memory of an entire community. There is a type of contamination that you can't see, smell, or touch, but that can kill you slowly, cell by cell. And it is precisely this type of invisible threat that leads us to the third location on our list of places so contaminated that even today, decades after its closure, radiation continues to emanate from the ground at dangerous levels. We are talking about the Gunnar mine, located on the shores of Lake Athabasca in Saskatchewan. And this story will show you that sometimes the impact of our actions remains far beyond our ability to control. Between 1955 and 1963, the Gunnar mine extracted uranium from the Canadian subsoil during the height of the nuclear arms race. It was a time when decisions were made based on geopolitical urgency, not on environmental concerns or long-term safety. Workers handled radioactive material with minimal protection. Nuclear waste was dumped indiscriminately. And when the mine finally closed, they simply abandoned everything on site. Equipment, structures, and of course, all that radiation that doesn't disappear over time. Today, the Gunnar mine is considered one of the most contaminated sites in Canada, a toxic monument to what happens when ambition ignores the consequences. But this is where the story transcends the environmental problem and enters truly inexplicable territory. Urban explorers who venture to this remote location, defying all warnings of radiological danger, return with accounts that defy all logic. They say that old mining equipment starts up on its own. Rusty excavators, abandoned for over 60 years, begin to make engine noises. Not a creaking of rusty metal in the wind, but the unmistakable sound of an engine running, even without fuel, even without a battery, even without any power source that could rationally explain what is happening. Environmental researchers working on pollution monitoring have also reported similar experiences. Imagine you're there collecting soil samples, doing your scientific work, and suddenly you hear the characteristic roar of heavy machinery starting up behind you. You turn around, your heart racing, and see that giant excavator covered in rust and decades of neglect, vibrating as if it were about to start operating. And then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stops. Absolute silence, as if something had decided its message had been delivered. The hidden truth behind these accounts may be even more disturbing than it seems. Some scientists speculate that extreme radiation can cause anomalous electronic effects, interference in measuring equipment, and even auditory hallucinations in exposed individuals. But this doesn't explain why multiple witnesses on different occasions report exactly the same phenomenon. And it definitely doesn't explain the other element that consistently appears in the Gunnar mine accounts: the glowing figure. Witnesses describe a humanoid silhouette walking among the abandoned buildings at night, emanating an ethereal, almost ghostly light. It's not the light of a flashlight or equipment. It's a light that seems to come from within the figure itself, a soft but unmistakable glow that moves purposefully through the radioactive ruins. Some believe they are seeing the physical manifestation of radiation itself, as if nuclear energy had somehow gained consciousness and form. Others have a more traditional, but no less chilling interpretation. It could be the spirit of a supervisor who died in an accident during mine operations and refuses to leave his post. Consider the mindset required for this. A man so dedicated to his work, so consumed by the responsibility of keeping the operation running, that even in death he continues to patrol that condemned place. Doesn't he realize that the mine closed decades ago? Or does he know perfectly well, but sense that there is still something to be protected, something to be watched over in that radioactive territory? And here's the detail that lends scientific credibility to these seemingly supernatural stories. Official environmental cleanup documents, technical reports produced by scientists and engineers explicitly mention unexplained anomalies detected by measuring equipment in the Gunnar mine area. Radiation readings that fluctuate for no apparent reason. Electromagnetic interference that does not correspond to any known source. Phenomena that even the scientists themselves, people trained to find rational explanations, have been unable to justify within the known parameters of physics. This raises a profound philosophical question. Are there forms of energy or manifestations of reality that science is not yet able to adequately measure or explain? Radiation itself is invisible to our senses, but we know it exists and that it kills. Are there other forces, other presences operating at frequencies that our instruments do not yet detect? Comment, anomaly confirmed. If you also think there is much more happening at the Gunnar mine than conventional science is willing to admit. There are stories that transcend the individual and touch on something much bigger, something that carries the weight of human history in its most tragic form. And it is precisely to this kind of place that we need to go now, because what happened in the next mine on our list is not just a local legend or an isolated paranormal phenomenon. It is a direct connection to one of the most devastating moments in modern history, and the consequences of that past still reverberate in ways that go far beyond what we can see or measure. Port Radium, located on the shores of Great Slave Lake in the Northwest Territories, is not just another abandoned mine. It is the place where the uranium used in the atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki came from. Let that sink in for a moment. The material that vaporized hundreds of thousands of people in August 1945, that changed the course of World War II and ushered in the nuclear age, was extracted from this Canadian soil between 1932 and 1960. Every kilogram of uranium that came out of that hole in the ground carried with it a destiny that no one at the mine could have fully imagined when they began operating. But even before the first atomic explosion, before the scientists of the Manhattan Project refined that uranium into weapons of mass destruction, the Dean indigenous people who had inhabited that region for thousands of years already knew that there was something profoundly wrong with that rock. They called it the Burning Rock, and their elders repeatedly warned that awakening it from the ground would bring terrible consequences. These were not empty superstitions. It was ancestral knowledge about a force that should remain untouched. The decisions made by the mine operators completely ignored these warnings. Worse still, when they needed labor to transport the radioactive ore, they hired Dean workers who carried sacks of uranium on their backs without any protection, without any warning about the invisible danger they were handling. Imagine the colonial mentality that allows this, using people as disposable tools, knowingly exposing them to a lethal substance, simply because their lives were considered less important than profit and production. And the curse foretold by the elders materialized in a horrifyingly concrete way. In the decades following the mine's closure, dozens of these Dean workers developed rare and devastating cancers. Men who had once been strong and healthy slowly withered away, their bodies consumed from the inside out by the radiation they had innocently carried years before. But according to accounts from the Dean communities, the impact didn't stop with that generation. Entire families report what they describe as a curse that passes through generations: unexplained illnesses, premature death, a persistent feeling that something was broken on a spiritual level that cannot be repaired. This is not just folklore. It is the lived record of generational trauma, of historical injustice, of consequences that refuse to disappear simply because the mine closed or because decades have passed. And what makes Port Radium even more disturbing is that even people who have no knowledge of this history, visitors who arrive without context, report intense emotional experiences upon entering the abandoned area. There's something in the air of that place. Visitors describe oppressive sensations of profound sadness and overwhelming guilt that arise for no apparent reason. It's not just the desolate environment or the awareness of being in a contaminated place. It's something more visceral, more immediate, as if the walls themselves retain the emotional memory of everything that happened there. And then there are the truly chilling accounts. People who touch the abandoned structures and suddenly see flashes of explosions, visions of atomic mushroom clouds rising into the sky. Others swear they hear distant screams, echoes of voices in languages they don't recognize, sounds that seem to come from very far away in both space and time. Could it be that the historical tragedy connected to this place itself has imbued the physical space with some kind of residual memory? That the energy released by the atomic bombs created with this uranium somehow created a bond that transcends distance and time? It sounds crazy, but when you hear testimony after testimony from independent people describing the same sensations, the same visions, you begin to question what we really know about how trauma and history are inscribed on places. Port Radium is a grim reminder that our actions have consequences that echo through time in ways we could never fully predict. Decisions made behind the scenes in corporate and government offices in the last century continue to kill people today, continue to haunt entire communities, continue to manifest in ways that science struggles to explain. It's a journey through the darkest layers of human history, where ambition, war, and indifference to human life meet at a single geographical point that refuses to let the past rest. Right, never forget, if you feel that stories like this need to be told and remembered, no matter how uncomfortable they may be.
After everything we've seen so far, you might think you've heard enough about abandoned mines in northern Canada. Because while the previous mines were destroyed, contaminated, or deliberately erased, this next mine is perfectly preserved, as if time simply stopped in 1969 and never started again. Discovery Mine, located in the Northwest Territories, closed more than 50 years ago. There are no roads, no accessible trails. It's just you, the pilot, and hundreds of kilometers of absolutely deserted Arctic tundra. And it is precisely in this extreme solitude that the strangest revelations begin. Pilots who regularly fly over the area, people who know that territory perfectly, report having seen smoke coming from the mine's chimneys. Clear, consistent smoke, as if the furnaces were lit and someone was still working down there. Obviously, when these reports began to circulate, some people decided to investigate. After all, if there's smoke, someone must be there, right? But every time a team manages to land and check, they find exactly what they would expect from a place abandoned for over half a century. Everything cold, everything deserted, no sign of recent activity. The chimneys are icy to the touch. There's no hot ash, no burning fuel, no rational explanation for the smoke that multiple independent witnesses swear they saw from above. But the true impact of Discovery Mine is only revealed when you actually enter the facility. Explorers who have managed to make this journey bring back descriptions that seem straight out of a psychological horror film. Dining tables still set, with rusty dishes positioned as if someone were about to sit down to eat. Work uniforms hanging on hooks on the walls, as if their owners had just taken them off and were returning for the next shift. Boots lined up at the entrance to the dormitories, waiting for feet that will never return. And then there's the detail that really sends shivers down your spine. The time clocks. You know those old machines where workers punched a card when they clocked in and out of their shifts? Discovery Mine still has its own on the walls, and some explorers swear they still keep track of times. Think about it. No electricity for over 50 years. No power source connected. But those hands keep moving, recording the phantom shifts of workers who left decades ago. Skeptics argue that it must be some kind of mechanical mechanism that keeps functioning, perhaps powered by changes in temperature or atmospheric pressure. But the hidden truth is that nobody really knows. Nobody has stayed long enough in that place to study the phenomenon properly, because there is something in the atmosphere of Discovery Mine that profoundly affects people. It's not just the preserved artifacts or the feeling of suspended time. It's something more subtle, more psychological. Visitors describe a growing feeling of being watched, of not truly being alone in that supposedly empty complex. Shadows moving in the periphery of their vision, sounds of footsteps echoing through corridors when no one is around, and the question that no one can answer: who or what is generating these experiences? Could it be that the very preservation of the place has somehow also preserved something intangible, something that transcends physical objects? Discovery Mine represents a different kind of haunting. It's not violent like the giant mine explosion. It's not tragically erased like Cassiar. It's not radioactive like Gunnar, or historically heavy like Port Radium. It's something more subtle, and perhaps for that very reason more unsettling. It's the feeling that time doesn't work the same way there, that the workers who left that place in 1969 may never have truly left completely, that their routines, their habits, their presence somehow remained imprinted on that frozen space, eternally repeating themselves in a dimension that only occasionally intersects with ours. And here's the final detail that makes Discovery Mine truly terrifying: the absolute isolation. When you're there, you're completely alone. The nearest civilization is hundreds of kilometers away. If something happens, if you need help, there's no one coming. You're alone in that preserved complex, surrounded by evidence of interrupted lives. Hearing sounds you shouldn't hear, seeing movements that shouldn't exist, or at least you should be alone. Comment alone, but not only if you also feel that there's much more inhabiting Discovery Mine than just empty structures and rusty equipment. 5 mines, 5 stories that began with ambition and ended in tragedy, leaving behind mysteries that defy any rational explanation. From the deadly arsenic frozen beneath Yellowknife to the town literally wiped off the map in Cassiar. From the radiation that causes equipment to switch on by itself in Gunnar to the cursed uranium that fueled the atomic bombs at Port Radium, all the way to Discovery Mine where time simply stopped and something still lingers in those icy corridors. These places prove that northern Canada holds secrets far beyond what we imagine, secrets that refuse to remain buried in the past. And you, would you dare to visit any of these abandoned mines? Which one affected you the most? Was it the ghostly nurse pointing at her chest, the glowing figure walking among radioactive ruins, or that unsettling feeling that in Discovery Mine you're never truly alone? Comment below. I made it to the end, and tell me which of these stories gave you the most chills. I read all the comments and love knowing how these stories resonate with you. If you've made it this far with me, it's because we share this fascination with the unknown, with places that carry memories that transcend the physical. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want to delve into more terrifying stories of abandoned places, not only in Canada but around the world, leave a like on the video. This shows that this type of content makes sense to you and helps me reach more people who, like us, want to understand the mysteries that exist in the shadows of history. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, now's the time. Every week I bring you a new exploration, a new mystery, a new place forgotten by time but not by the spirits that still inhabit it. Click subscribe and activate the bell. There's a video over here about haunted trails in Ontario that perfectly complements what we discussed today. Click and continue with me there, because our exploration of Canada's most haunted places is far from over. Until the next exploration. And remember, some places never truly let us go, even after we've left. The question is, are you ready to discover which ones they are?